Welcome. My name is Corinne Waldow. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Boulder Chamber, and I would like to welcome you today to the Food Service Office Hours, where you're going to be going over some of the new guidance that came out of the state this weekend. We want to take this opportunity to thank the other economic development agencies and the other chambers in the county for making sure our businesses are reopening in a safe manner for both our health and for our economy. We also want to thank Boulder County Public Health for offering these weekly hours to make sure that you have time to get the most up-to-date information, to ask your questions, and to provide your feedback. We'll go over it in a little bit, but there's another session for City of Boulder restaurants later this afternoon to go over the City of Boulder right-of-way applications. We'll talk about that later, but we will be covering mostly today the public health information that came out of the governor's office this weekend. Please post all your questions in the Q&A feature, and then we'll be sending a recording of this webinar along with resources later today after the webinar. At this time, please welcome Zach Swank with Boulder County Public Health.
Thanks, Corinne, and thanks to the Boulder Chamber for continuing to be our partner in hosting these webinars, as well as thanks to our other chambers and economic partners across Boulder County that are helping all of us navigate these challenging times. So today we're going to cover the updates to Safer at Home. Obviously lots of changes here for the restaurant industry and resources to support you, and then we'll have time for your Q&A. So timeline here, on the 22nd, Boulder County extended our face covering order. On the 25th, Governor Polis extended the Safer at Home order through June 1st, and we're expecting an update there. Private camps are now allowed. And then the biggie, of course, tomorrow, restaurants able to open at 50% capacity or 50 customers, whichever is fewer. Zach Lustgarten, my colleague, is going to dig into the nitty-gritty there. And we're also expecting additional changes and updates coming on June 1st out of the state. But just as a reminder, as these orders evolve, it's good to remember that COVID is just as contagious now as it was, a month ago or 2 months ago. And we're going to be under some form of some sort of restriction until we have a vaccine, treatment, or herd immunity. And it's going to take months, if not longer, to reach those milestones. So, just please keep in mind, as you're planning for your business, as you're planning for your life, that we're going to be under some version of Safer at Home. It might be called something else, but we'll be under some version of some restrictions for the foreseeable future. And as a friendly reminder, as we loosen restrictions, we're not doing it because COVID-19 is becoming less contagious. It is still just as contagious as it always was. It is still just the same threat as it always was. We are just evolving in how we respond to it. We have better testing, we have better contact tracing. We're able to follow up on outbreaks as they happen and keep them contained. But it is crucial as much as possible to stay at home, if not needed. Obviously we want to see patrons back in restaurants. However, for any sort of non-essential activities, stay at home, stay isolated as much as possible, and please remember that our face covering order is in effect. So from here, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Zach Lustgarten, who is muted.
Hi everybody, Zach Lustgarten here. So I have a lot of information, obviously. There's been a lot of changes over the weekend, and today we're going to talk about those updates. First of all, I just wanted to highlight that later today there is going to be a webinar that Corinne had mentioned. So it's at 3:30, and if you go to the Chamber's website, you'll be able to register for that. But it'll be for extending your seating into those right-of-way areas, whether it be into the street or the parking lot. So those are some changes that are coming. So they'll be having that webinar later today. And then obviously the reopening guidance for dine-in service. So let's just jump right in. The first slide here is kind of what we know. This has been since the beginning of March. We've had pickup only. So these are for folks that are just going to continue doing pickup. These are the state guidelines. Nothing really has changed here, so I don't want to focus on this too much. We all kind of know where we're at this point for pickup and delivery and takeout. So just wanted to highlight that it is still possible to continue along these lines if you're not comfortable reopening. We'll talk a little bit more about what that is, what the reopening looks like later. But Wednesday, May 27th, we are talking about dine-in service returning to Boulder County. We are going to adhere to the state guidance and the state guidelines wholeheartedly. So here they are. We're going to break it down into guidance for workspaces, employees, and customers. Starting with workspaces, this is taken directly from the guidance documents that were provided by the state yesterday. So outdoor dining service would look like this. These would be the requirements. Different parties would be 6 feet apart, a minimum of 6 feet apart. So this is a bit of a change from the draft that we talked about last week. It started out with 8 feet apart. So it's actually come down to 6 feet apart based on our feedback and comments that were sent to the state. The spacing of tables would also need to be 6 feet apart. Employees must wear face coverings. That is, again, something that we've talked about since March. And there would be disinfecting and deep cleaning of all shared surfaces between seatings. And then I just put a note here that you would want to work with your local municipality to get authorization for expanding that space to accommodate outdoor dining. As we talked about, Boulder, City of Boulder's having their webinar today, but if you're in a different municipality, you would need to work with your local local folks there. Indoor dining service. This is what we have been waiting for. So what the requirements say are that you can have 50% of your posted occupancy code limit and or a maximum of 50 patrons. Essentially, whichever one comes first. The cap, as we know right now, is set at 50, and that does not matter the size of your facility. It's 50 as far as we know at this point. Now, it's important that I note that we just got this guidance yesterday, and we're going to continue to evaluate it. But at this time, that's where we are. So in the coming days, we'll know a little bit more. But the expectation that I have is that it would be 50% of your posted occupancy limit or 50 total patrons. For the dine-in service, you would be looking at different parties being 6 feet apart, just like the outdoor spacing, and the tables would be the same, 6 feet or more apart. All employees, again, wear face coverings. And when we're talking about the indoor spaces, ventilation is going to be important. To increase airflow, it's recommended that opening windows is happening during these summer months, and that you're not relying solely on air conditioning. Deep cleaning and disinfecting of all shared surfaces between party turnovers. This is, again, something that we've talked about in prior weeks. And then keeping parties together, not allowing intermingling of parties. Moving forward, those party sizes would be 8 or fewer. And the next thing that we talked about several times over the last few weeks, what we're trying to do is reduce congregating and promote social distancing. So the effort by the business should be to reduce congregating inside and outside of your establishment. So what you want to do is encourage reservations. preferably, we would say require them if feasible. Waiting parties should not be congregating in entrance areas and should wait probably in their car or off premises until seating is available. So if you had some type of app or seating situation that you can send reserved guests notice that their table is ready, that's what we're talking about there. There would be no communal seating under this phase, no self-service stations or buffets. So again, it's self-service is the key there. It's not saying that buffets are disallowed, it would just be no self-service at buffets. And no seating of yourself. This is a piece, the next piece that we've gotten some questions on early this morning. Again, this guidance just came out yesterday. But if you were using your bar to prepare food or drinks, you could not allow folks to sit at that bar. However, if the bar is not being used for those purposes, if you have a secondary location where you make drinks, then you would use the bar as any other seating in your establishment. So it would still adhere to the same requirements as all the other seating, with 6 feet distance between parties and between folks that were sat at the bar. Again, we've talked about this in previous meetings, but floor markings to create proper distancing and allow for flow of traffic. The goal is always just to prevent congregating and promote social distancing. So those are going to assist you. And then clearly mark tables that are not available for seating. So how you do that is up to you, but table tents or tape, things of that nature would be recommended. Continuing with workspaces, signage. We would like you to place signage on your doors to promote hygiene and sanitation expectations, and then obviously to prevent folks that have signs or symptoms of illness from entering your establishment, because that is the key, is to prevent that illness from being spread. Minimizing objects that are touched by multiple patrons, and how that happens would be to remove or close games and dance floors that require or encourage standing. So if you have darts or pool tables, arcade games, anything like that, board games, those things would want to be removed under this phase. The discontinuation of tablecloths would be recommended, and that you move to single-use paper products, or that you remove and replace laundered tablecloths after each party, so that they're not just on the tables throughout the day or throughout the service. Disinfecting of any shared objects such as check presenters, POS machines, things like that. As we've talked a lot about, increasing cleaning and disinfection protocols of these high-touch areas, and things like menus. What we would prefer, and what they are saying in these requirements or these recommendations, is that you should use single-use menus, menu boards, or the online menus, perhaps where you have a barcode that's scanned by someone's mobile device that goes to your menu, your online menu. Providing single-use or single-serving condiments, disinfecting restrooms every hour, and then blocking off stalls within the restroom to allow for 6 feet of distancing between patrons. So that might require you reducing your bathroom capacity. And then strongly recommended that hand sanitizer be placed at your check-in area and throughout the venue. Moving on to the guidance for employees. So we've talked a lot about this, again, nothing new here, but implementing symptom monitoring protocols. So since March 26th, when we entered the Public Health Order 2022 that closed our dining rooms, we've really been talking a lot about this piece, because we want to prevent, again, the illness from being in your facility and from your employees getting sick. So workplace temperature monitoring and symptom screening questions should be implemented where possible. And then, again, we'll talk a little bit more about what outbreaks look like at the end, but you are encouraged to use the CDPHE symptom tracker. Everything that you see here in blue is a link that will take you to the state's website to show you that information. Under the new guidance, it's put in place that you appoint one employee per shift to monitor your staff and the public for adherence of the safety measures. What that looks like, I'm not sure, but I assume that again, this is brand new to me as well, but you would have someone at your door kind of making sure that social distancing is being followed, that tables aren't intermingling, and then that your staff is also adhering to all the requirements. Employees, obviously we want them to stay home when sick. I've put some information here, a link to information about emergency paid sick leave. So check that out if you are a restaurant owner. And then 6 feet of distance at all times. Just like in every walk of life at this point, we want to promote social distancing. Moving forward with employee requirements, we want to implement systems and minimize staff interaction. So how that happens would be through your workflows in your kitchen, shift cohorting, which means that folks that work together always work together. You're not intermingling different shifts with one another. Or if folks had typically gone from store to store, if you own several stores, that is minimized, because if you have an issue with one shift, you may be able to prevent other shifts from also coming down with any kind of illness. Staggering of shifts and implementing shift changes in a way that there's not congregation or breaks. You know, in the break room, we shouldn't be congregating. We want to promote and make sure that we have 6 feet of distancing at all times. Face coverings for your staff, and then also every vendor that enters your building. So if you get deliveries multiple times a day, those folks need to be wearing face coverings as well. And then requiring gloves in the food industry, we're always wearing gloves with ready-to-eat foods. So I did put required gloves or frequent hand washing. So gloves are not required with non-ready-to-eat foods, but they are with like things that are no longer going to be, there's no kill step that they'll go through before you handling that product and it going to the customer. So if it's going to be cooked, we just, you know, continue to wash your hands as you normally would. Encourage frequent breaks to wash your hands at least every 30 minutes. And obviously as you enter and exit the facility. More with employees. Hygienic practices, just as I noted, we, in the Colorado Retail Food Rules and Regs, these sections are always covered, but we're not working when we're sick, obviously. Frequent hand washing, changing gloves between tasks. So an example would be working with raw food and then to ready-to-eat food, hand washing. And then every time you're changing those gloves, right? When you put on a new pair of gloves, you want to wash your hands between the old and the new. Now, yeah, that's just pretty normal stuff. This next bullet point is simplifying the menu. When you have a busy menu and you have a lot more procedural steps to get dishes out, it might mean that you have more folks in a tight space. So simplifying your menu, paring it down to the essentials will assist you in kind of having fewer people butting shoulders and things like that. And in turn, you would have great physical distancing in that case. Consider virtual meetings and meetings outside. This is a recommendation. So if you're having team meetings, make sure that if it's not necessary that someone be at the facility, they can do that online, or you at least have them outside. Each night, folks should take home their belongings, including their water bottles. And then if possible, the restaurant really should be providing high quality face coverings for every employee, if possible. Now, it's important to note that in the food industry, we're not asking that you have surgical masks. We want to keep those for our healthcare workers, and facial coverings are required. But if you have the means to provide high quality face coverings, we ask that you do. Moving on to guidance for customers. This is essentially the same as what we talked about in the draft guidance last week. We want to provide an option for customers to sign in to facilitate notifying them if there are any exposures that occur. Contactless payment options whenever possible, and establishing waiting areas outside. We don't want folks congregating at our entry and exit points. The reservations piece that was in the draft guidance has not found its way to this, so that is a little bit relaxed from last week of what we talked about. What has remained the same from the draft guidance is that it would be sit down only, no standing or congregating in a bar area, entry, exit, or any interior spaces as I spoke of. You want to continue curbside pickup and delivery options if those work for you. We've heard a lot of positive feedback about that. And if you feel that you're doing well with that and you're not ready, then go ahead and continue that. And we want to promote that. This next piece can be difficult, but you should request that facial coverings be worn by customers when they're not eating and drinking. So for example, when they come in the restaurant and they pass several different tables on their way to their table, they should be wearing facial coverings. And in Boulder County and several of our municipalities, it is required at this point that we wear facial coverings in public. So this is been in effect for many days at this point. So if you do have folks that don't want to adhere to those requests, you do have the ability for law enforcement to step in, and you should consider refusing service to customers who refuse to adhere to either your masking requirements or hygiene and physical distancing requirements. So if you have folks that are intermingling tables, that is where that one appointed employee should come in, and you should consider removing those folks because they're just making your place of business unsafe. And then you should make accommodations for individuals that are unable to adhere to hygiene and social distancing requirements, so offering takeout. So this next slide is put together by the CDC, and it's really straightforward. It says, should we open? Should we reopen? Are we ready? And it's a decision tree for you. You can see in that first step, when you first talk about considering to reopen, are you consistent with all these requirements that I just spoke of? If you're not, then you're not ready to open, and that's okay. Tomorrow is a very quick turnaround. As you can see, this presentation is a very quick turnaround from yesterday's announcement from the governor. So we're all trying to keep up with the ever-evolving safer at home requirements. So please do utilize this CDC decision tree. It is available here in the slides, but also you can just Google it. Should we reopen our restaurant CDC? And you should be able to find it. I won't bore you with all the details of it, but it is a great tool, okay? Wanted to go over some common Q&A that we've gotten from our previous sessions. A lot of questions surrounding food trucks. Folks asking if food trucks are allowed. And yes, they are. They hold a retail food license and they're able to continue to operate as usual as long as social distancing is adhered to. The next one, are bars able to reopen? So what we've heard from the governor as of yesterday is that no, if you do not serve food and you are a bar, that you will not be reopening, and that will be reevaluated in June. Again, that's from the state, so we're just following that public health order. More on the Q&A of bars. Why are they not able to open? The statement is that all decisions are based on the consideration of for potential exposure, and in a bar setting, it's just really high risk, and it's what is the likelihood of the requirements being able to be adhered to and followed. So just in a bar, it just doesn't easily meet that. But you can still continue to offer takeout, delivery, curbside of the alcohol, as we've seen relaxed guidelines on that. For breweries, breweries can change their business model and reopen to operate like a business or to operate like a restaurant. The way that is done is through partnerships. So food must be provided by a licensed retail food establishment. And two notes here, we're not talking about light snacks or reheated, like commercially prepared Hot Pockets or something like that. Those don't meet the intent of food service. Also, allowing patrons to bring in their own food or takeout from an app or something like that, that does not meet the requirements or the intent of this allowance. So there should be more to come out of the governor's office on that, but that's where we're at right now. So what if a restaurant opens and it's not adhering to requirements? Well, we need you to let us know. That's where we come in. I work on the food safety team and I work as a business liaison in this COVID-19 response. And if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. So everybody really needs to pitch in and be following the same rules. And there are situations where there is going to be, as we saw in Castle Rock, some situations where licenses could be considered as for revocation if we're not following these steps. It's just important that we all are in this together and we get to the next phase. If we're successful in this phase of continuing our social distancing, and I realize that opening at 50% capacity is not ideal, but that's where we're at right now. And if we continue to see positive trends, we hope to continue down that path. As always, here we have guidance and tools that you can utilize from multiple sources. Again, this presentation will be available after. I want to note that I cannot provide you legal advice if you call us. Compliance with the orders is required, and requirements are frequently changing. So we're here to support you, but if you have questions that are very specific to your business model, we do recommend that you contact an attorney and work through the specifics of your issue and how it relates to the public health orders. As I spoke about earlier, outbreaks. If you do have 2 or more employees that are confirmed or, confirmed or suspected of COVID-19 within a 14-day period, you should send those to the outbreak report form to Boulder County Public Health. Here's the link. And we'll help you determine what steps are necessary, okay? I see that there's lots of questions piling up, so I'm gonna move on really quickly from here. Here's where you can go for more information. Obviously, Chamber of Commerce, our website, COVID-19 Business, and Energize Colorado's got really good resources for you as well as local business owners. Every Tuesday, you can find the food service office hours. You'll see me and my colleagues present, as well as Corinne. And again, contact us. So here's our complaint call center, and we're available 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. All right, with that, I will go ahead and open it up to Q&A.
Thanks, Zach. We do have quite a few questions piling in. So I'm trying to combine some of these because there's a couple that are very overlapping. The first one would be, could you explain how this will impact food service in hospitals? And maybe also talk about, maybe hospitality as a second, hotels.
So in hospitals, if you're offering food to the public, okay, versus just patient feeding, if you're just patient feeding, you're going to remain where you were as an essential service, and nothing much changes. But if you are offering, if you have like a buffet situation or something of that nature, some kind of dining hall open to the public, you would have to meet all the requirements that we've talked about. And I do think it would be beneficial to contact your legal advice, and if you have very specific questions. But yeah, the big thing is there that if you are offering food to the public, that's where we kick into retail food versus the essential service that you've been operating under Safer at Home.
Okay. And then a little bit about hotels. I know a question came up on the hotel one about those buffets. If you have breakfast buffet with your hotel stay, what are some changes that may happen with this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, your seating, right? Your seating would have to be distanced. And then as far as the buffet goes, I think we're going to have to look at that because that's a really interesting piece. Lane, you can chime in as well, but I would foresee the self-service portion would not be allowed under these orders.
Yeah, that's correct. The buffets can only be served by someone that's an employee. There can't be any self-service. So if you do have a buffet, it would still require an attendant to actually serve the food. So no customer self-service is an option.
All right, so a little bit about the 6 feet spacing. It says there should be a minimum of 6 feet away from should we have a minimum of 6 feet away from common access points as well, such as ingress, egress, bathroom, and other areas where people might queue up or, be in the same area?
Yeah, that I think is another piece where you're looking at how you're going to handle people coming in and out, ideally doing reservations. But yeah, if there's any areas you need to manage that, whether that's markers on the floor, other ways to manage bathrooms that you do need to make sure you can keep that social distancing. So certainly keeping tables away from the ways people come in and out.
The cap is 50 patrons, or does the 50 include staff?
As I read it, it is 50 patrons.
Yes. And I know there's a lot of questions about that 50% capacity and 50 people with all the different configurations. So I saw a lot of questions on that, and we're going to seek clarification, but as of right now, the state has put a cap of 50 or 50%, whichever is the smaller amount. So we'll be pushing for further clarification and allowances. But right now, that's 50%, including indoor, outdoor combination, until we can get further clarification from the state.
So as you saw there's the indoor, outdoor, there we have distinct rooms, we have separate areas with closed doors. Right now, the guidance is the 50 or 50% for all of those scenarios until you could get further guidance.
Yeah, and just to be clear, guidance versus requirements, these are all requirements of the order. So we're just trying to share that and clarify it, but yeah, it's not an option.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually skip through it. There's a lot of specific situations that came up in the questions, so we've covered most of those there, and then we'll continue to hand out the information as you get it, just like some of the other industries. If we get clarification on the requirements, we'll pass it along to anybody that's been on these webinars. What recommendation can we give staff for making masks more protective of them, since cloth masks are more for the safety of others? Do we add a filter? Are there specific materials?
There's some great resources that I've linked here. Just kind of go back. That I think we have it in here, but if not, it's the mask project. Do we see that?
The PPE guidance and resources is also on there.
Yeah. There's lots of good resources online that I will be happy to send Corinne, but the orders don't speak to anything besides just the fact that you have to have a facial covering.
Lane, you've mentioned on a previous webinars about why some people are adding filters and what just the whole purpose behind it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different models of do-it-yourself masks that people put coffee filters and things like that. And the goal there is you're just adding extra layers, which is helping knock down the droplets. So again, masks are protective of everybody around the person wearing the mask. It's knocking down the droplets from the person that's wearing it. They aren't a respirator to filter the air that you're breathing in. So even adding coffee filters or other things, that doesn't still make it a respirator. So, and we aren't pushing people to go buy respirators because the supplies are still really strained for our healthcare systems. But if everybody's knocking down the droplets, that is a protective measure versus someone that's not wearing a mask that then can expose people.
Okay, a little bit about seat configuration, Zach. It says 6 feet, but if people are sitting back to back with tall physical barriers between the booths, does that fit the requirements, or do those also need to be 6 feet apart? Can people sit back to back?
My interpretation is 6 feet is, it's clear that it's 6 feet without the partition, with or without the partition. So if you have booths back to back, one booth between two booths should be eliminated. It's about as clear as I can make that mud.
Yeah, the only exception would be if it's physically in another room, and so
Right.
booths that happen to be on adjoining walls are fine, but it has to be fully enclosed. So yeah, just a partition that goes up above the head is not adequate.
Okay. Will bathroom regulations be enforced across all industries or just restaurants? If your facility shares a bathroom with, say, a retailer, will they be required to follow the restaurant regulations as far as closing down and cleaning?
My intuition is yes. I have not delved into retail requirements, so I'm only speaking to food service, but you should meet all the requirements as they're seen here.
So if the bathroom is shared, certainly you do need to adhere to whatever's the most stringent. I think pretty much the guidance for bathroom use is pretty consistent across all the sectors. I don't know that the others call out every hour of cleaning, but I think, so if that is the one difference and a restaurant is one of the people sharing it, it would require that be adhered to. But I know the limitation on patron usage, really looking at limiting how many stalls if you can't keep 6 foot separation, and having systems for how people are accessing it so that you don't get congregation. All those are covered in the other sectors as well.
Yeah, so just in office, retail, all of those, there is guidance about restrooms and closing off stalls and stuff like that. So you can look at some of the other checklists if you're sharing with some of the others. I also had a question about, if you have only a single bathroom and you don't want people congregating outside waiting, they may need to put some sort of signage up to show that it's occupied so that people aren't congregating outside the bathroom as well, correct?
Correct.
Ideal.
Yeah, and add those floor markings as well. So if there's any potential for a line, you should be implementing floor markings 6 feet apart to promote that distancing.
And then that's 6 feet from there to tables and all of that. So making sure there's a good barrier around individuals. Now, there's a question about ordering food. Will patrons be required to order food in order to be in the dining facility, or can they just drink in a facility that also serves food?
It doesn't address anything related to what your patrons order from you. So that would be up to you on serving people. So yeah, it doesn't require them to order food.
Okay.
And then I'll just add to that, if it's a bar setting and there is a bartender, they can't sit at the bar. That's how I'm interpreting this. So it would be sit down only, no standing. They would have to be seated at a table.
Okay.
And again, the distinction is really, I think, in the liquor licensing. So restaurants that have a bar and serve alcohol are still allowed to operate. If you do not have any retail food license where you only sell alcohol, those are the things that are more stringent. So again, there could be other allowances, and we're seeking those clarifications, because it does call out in the order that people who can provide food from a retail food establishment, like Zach talked about, could still provide some in-house dining service. And again, bars are specifically excluded, so I don't know what facilities they're thinking of other than potentially tasting rooms and things like that, where some retail food can be provided there.
And in a news story, I think one of the clarifications that need to come out is that someone mentioned food trucks and caterers, people that do follow other restaurant standards, providing the food and partnering with them. Because one of the questions was about the pre-made wholesale food, and you covered that, Zach, that just going out and getting a bunch of Twinkies or something from Costco doesn't satisfy that food service.
Unfortunately, no. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a question about evaporative coolers. If evaporative coolers are running at 100% outside air intake, do they meet the standard for safety?
Very specific question. I would have to look at it more.
Yeah,
But
the guidance it just talks about having adequate ventilation, and so that's not further defined. So again, if your system was designed for the space, it has the airflows, and you're just operating it as you normally would, that all meets the satisfaction. You don't need to make any modifications to your system or run it in a different fashion. Unfortunately, that guidance is fairly vague. If your system is down and not operating, that clearly does not meet it. So if your HVAC goes down, you would not be allowed to operate until it's up and running again.
Okay. Without some other industries, as this question came up, that fresh air component has been a big deal if you're able to get in. And I know it's mentioned in some of the orders. But as far as the proper ventilation, if they have specific questions, they should probably seek guidance from whom?
Really, you're not going to get more guidance from, I think, public health. I think if you're concerned that your system isn't working, you would need to call a service contractor to come out and take a look at it. But again, no modifications are needed to existing systems that are already designed as for the building originally. So that this does not require additional units or anything like that. It just requires that you make sure that they're all working.
Okay. So we have a couple questions about entertainment. If all regulations are followed, could entertainment be allowed? And we have indoor and outdoor. So if you could cover those, especially the outdoor, if it's in a common area and not necessarily within the restaurant. So I think the question's around, can they have entertainment?
I think I can take this one, Zach, but please add. So in the original draft, it had called out no outdoor entertainment, but that has been removed in the final version, at least from the governor's office. I think it just talks about you cannot have dance floors or any areas that would be allow congregation. And then if you do provide any of that, it's going to eat into your square footage area. And I think those people would probably be counted as part of your patrons of your 50 count. I don't know that piece for sure, but I think that's what I would expect the state to say. But it does not prohibit any of those things. So you can have entertainment. You just have to address all the social distancing pieces, and then how you're going to accommodate making sure there's no congregation, so dancing, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I think you just have to know what the consequences of providing that entertainment would be. And usually it is congregation and it is dancing. So just take that into consideration.
And if it's outdoor, making sure there's not large groups, congregating around your patio or your door to listen to that entertainment and maintaining that social distancing.
Correct.
Okay. So someone said they are a caterer and want to know if it's okay for them to have functions outside for 50 guests if there's sufficient space and the buffet service is not self-service.
Certainly under these provisions, again, looking at a dining facility that's licensed, which a caterer is licensed, it seems to fit under all those requirements. That being said, I don't think this is intended to apply to allowing special events like festivals and things like that. So this needs to be more of a specific, like thinking of a potentially like a, I don't know what the scenario they're thinking of is, but again, where this is a very clearly running more like a restaurant or a dining event. So that seems like it would fall within all of these provisions.
Okay. And if they were to hold a buffet, it cannot be self-service, even if it has the tops to the buffets in that catering situation.
Yeah, it's not a good idea in general, but you definitely cannot have any self-service of any kind.
Do you have any insight into the alcohol to go with food orders continuing through June? Has that been extended as well for curbside?
To our knowledge, it has. Yes.
Yeah, that's still provided as an option, and not just for retail food and restaurants. I think that's for bars or other places that may still be closed to patrons. They can still sell to go.
Okay. Just a hotel did point out that they've switched to grab and go bags for some of those buffets, those breakfasts and lunches, as opposed to buffets, and that's a practice that other hotels can have. Under this, since hotels do have foods, a lot of hotels have food service, can they accommodate groups up to 50 with social distancing guidelines?
As long as it meets all of these requirements that Zach highlighted. Again, that's maximum of 50% occupancy or 50 people with all the social distancing, whichever is the smaller.
Okay. Someone asked, should they post "enter at your own risk" on the front door?
No, I would not recommend that.
Okay.
I would recommend looking at the various signage that the chamber has helped produce, things that encourage people to follow the various social distancing and the things like that, but I would not post things like optional or enter at your own risk or any of that stuff.
Yep. And I will resend to everybody in the group the list of signs. There's, if you're sick, do not enter, come, make sure you're wearing a mask, you know, all of those pieces. The signs you can put in your bathrooms requiring people to wash their hands, maintain social distancing. All those signs are in the resources that have been provided, and they're in English and Spanish.
And
So
if the intent of that sign was as somehow limiting liability, you probably should talk to your attorneys to figure out what liabilities you have and how you want to address those. But I don't think that sign is an adequate way to try to address that.
okay, I'm just trying to, we're coming on time here. So no self-serve beverage machines, is that correct? Does that fall under that as well?
Yeah, no self-service of any kind. I would even caution that idea of grab and go. That can't be a whole bunch of bags of food for people to self-grab where other people could be handling things. Those need to be handed out. So no self-service.
Okay. How does seat yourself remain safe in a casual quick service restaurant? Can you still do that, seat yourself?
No. The requirements are pretty clear that there is no seating yourself. And I do understand that we're talking about a fast casual model, but that is going to be a hurdle for you if that's your business. But you should have someone that is addressing that at the door, one of your staff.
I think also you're going to have to look at your seating to make sure people that there's no way that they could just start seating themselves and sit next to each other. So you're going to have to either eliminate seating or find ways to keep it from being accessed, and likely going to need to appoint someone who is now seating people. So that becomes a challenge for you.
And again, I just want to reiterate for those types of businesses, if they're feeling like this is not doable and things are going well under takeout, curbside delivery, et cetera, continue with that model. So you don't have to do away with that. We would still encourage that strongly.
And if you have table numbering or some system like that where you can't necessarily have staff seating everyone, you can assign people to open tables that you've now cleaned between users. So there can be creative ways that you figure out how to manage that don't require having, you know, a lot of extra staffing, but you cannot let people just sit wherever they want.
Okay. So there was a question about confirmed road closures in downtown Boulder. I'm not going to ask you two to answer that. We do have a webinar today at 3:30 with the city of Boulder. That is a city project, that and the right-of-way applications. And we'll get some more guidance around that, but there are planned road closures as well as additional applications for right-of-way spaces for the city. And I know some of the other cities are talking about it. Are you going to make a list of recommendations for staff safety, like changing clothes at work and laundering shower directly after? Are there any additional guidance to help, staff make sure that they are reducing their exposure?
What we'll do with the order that's come down now is we will be creating new checklists. If you're familiar with what we've done in the past, we'll create checklists for restaurants and food service in general. That should be coming this week. Those additional kinds of recommendations are pieces that we could put in that checklist that are requirements, but they would be recommendations. So look for that in the checklist. We should have those ready for you by next week.
There's also talk this might be something we can talk about, as the resource and support organizations. There's talk of creating some sort of brochure in addition to the signs that restaurants could print out and hand out to customers that comes out from somebody outside of them, telling them these are requirements so that they can mitigate some of the negative feedback. So I just put that out as like an option that was presented, and we can talk a little bit about, what resource we can provide. I know restaurants aren't the only ones, maybe retailers would be interested in something like this. Okay, just to confirm, there is not, the 50% or 50 guests is indoor and outdoor at this time.
Yeah, again, we don't have any clarification from the state. It talks about maximum occupancy. So I don't know that the maximum occupancy, if that has anything to do with your outdoor occupancy as well. So we need to get that clarification from the state. Ideally, we'll get that as soon as we can and pass it along, but we don't have that information from them, and we're expecting something from the state health department, hopefully today.
Okay, and once you have that, we will forward it on to anybody that's signed up for these.
Yeah, and again, if you want to do something different than what you just need to consult your attorneys, but at this point, we don't have any further guidance from the state on what their intent was or what they were thinking.
Right.
That's our goal, is to find out.
2 last minute questions and then we need to close up. Can someone come inspect a restaurant to see if it's okay?
Are you asking for, if they're talking about public health coming out to look at your setup? We don't have capacity or staff, or certainly the resources to cover the time for that. So you need to just adhere to this, but we don't have any way to come out and kind of approve your layouts for you. It's really just pretty simple though on the spacing. It's really just looking at making sure no diners from different parties can be any closer than 6 feet. So however far you need to push things away to do that. And then again, maximum of 50% occupancy aside from that. So hopefully you can look at the different resources we have online for looking at your tables and how you might lay them out. But yeah, we unfortunately don't have any capacity to do that.
And then last piece, do you know when the next set of guidance will come out about restaurants occupancy in those pieces?
I don't at this time. I don't know if there was a deadline date on this most recent order. That would be the best clue and so I have to go back and read through that to see if there was an expiration date. That would be the most likely time to expect something else to change, other than us getting more clarity on a lot of these questions that we have and you have as well.
Okay, and I appreciate both. I know that you guys got the guidance yesterday and put this together, and had already gotten some questions, and I've submitted those to the state. So we will get the answers to people as soon as they have them, consult an attorney if it's a specific interpretation for your facility. And then after that, continue to be on these calls, ask questions, and adhere to safer practices. We didn't get to a couple questions more along the lines of what you can serve at a bar, but we'll follow up with those individuals. At this time, I want to thank you, our attendees, for coming. If you'd like to join, if you're in the city of Boulder and like to join the city of Boulder, right of way, street closure, all of that, that's at 3:30 today. That's through the city. And we'll be doing that. You can go to the Boulder Chamber website, register, and get the Zoom login for that. Also, these are weekly calls. We have them at 1 o'clock every Tuesday, an opportunity for you to ask questions once you've started to work on your facility and design it and have some questions. Zach and Lane have dedicated some time every week to the food service. I want to thank Boulder County Public Health for doing this cross industries, for trying to turn this around so quickly for us today. And I hope to see everybody next week and on the call later today if you're in the city of Boulder. Have a wonderful afternoon, and here's to safe reopening of our restaurants.
Thank you all.
Thank you.